coming. I got him to sleep rather quickly. I forced myself to stay awake a little longer, relishing in the intimacy of his arm pressing me against him. Every now and then, he would nuzzle my hair in the sweetest way. It was heavenly. I tilted my head up a little so I could take a peek at his sleeping face. Edward looked so beautiful when he was sleeping. The moonlight filtered in through the window, and made his face the softest shade of pale, emphasizing his peaceful expression. I wanted to bring my hand down and caress his cheeks, his stubbly jaw, his full, pouty lips. But I was afraid that would wake him up. So eventually I pressed myself impossibly closer to his chest, and closed my eyes, falling into a deep, dreamless slumber. The high-pitched screeching of an alarm clock woke me, but I was so comfortable I didn't want to get up. Without my permission, my head nuzzled into the warm chest in front of me, then the chest let out a thick groan, and pulled away. I opened my eyes to a better sight than yesterday. Edward was still beside me, lying on his back with his eyes closed, grabbing at his alarm clock blindly. It was quite the sight, the sour look on his face. It made me chuckle. I rolled over on my back and stretched my arms above my head with a yawn. Best sleep ever, hands down. Edward finally got the alarm clock off. I loathed that thing. I grudgingly sat up on the bed, while Edward rubbed at his eyes. When he finally met my gaze, he gave me a timid half smile, and sat up against the headboard, running his fingers through his hair lazily. It was messier than normal. All my fault. I mentally smiled. We were both quiet for a few moments, and then I realized I should get home before Esme woke up. I got up out of the bed and put my shoes back on in silence. It wasn't awkward. At least not for me.
So are you coming back tonight?
Edward asked quietly from his spot against the headboard. I turned to face him, and rolled my eyes. Where else would I be? I joked with a small grin. He seemed relieved by my reassurance, so I walked over to his bedside table, and removed the bag of cookies I had stashed in my pocket, Shockolate chip, and deposited them beside the alarm clock. With a wave over my shoulder, I exited the French doors and climbed down the lattice. I nearly skipped the whole way home, across the still dark yard. It was a good day. I made Esme breakfast again this morning. After I showered and got dressed, I felt horrible about yesterday, when I ended up lying to her about my whereabouts, when I came in the back door, at 11:30 in the morning. She thought I had just woken up early and left the house. I hated lying to Esme. When I sat down at the table across from her, I started eating hastily. All that sleep really gave me an appetite. Esme looked up at me from her plate and smiled warmly. "Sleep well?" she asked, excited and amused at my refreshed mood. I nodded at her enthusiastically with a wide grin. "You have no idea." And when Alice came skipping into the kitchen, whistling and smiling in her own exuberant way, I didn't want to vomit. In fact, I had to resist the urge to whistle along with her. It was the most normal I had felt since before the incident. School was so much different when I was completely awake. Some aspects were good, some were bad. Everything was much more clear and vivid. It was harder to block out all the people around me, and it made me tense. But the bad still didn't outweigh the good. I paid close attention in every class, taking notes meticulously, making up for every day I was too out of it to put my best effort forward. I could hear more of the hushed whispers as I made my way across the quad with my hood up and head down, but even that couldn't spoil my mood. I was in my own little world, in a bedroom a few miles away, an unlikely sanctuary. When I saw Edward on my way to third period, I gasped. His dark circles were nearly gone now, loping towards me in the quad in his leather jacket, with that same indifferent expression, as always, except now he was practically glowing with rejuvenation. It was nearly better than watching him sleep. He ignored me like usual, just passing me by without a glance. But I couldn't find it in myself to be bitter about that today. I did spend the last 2 nights in his bed, after all. And to make my good mood even better, when Mike spotted me, he turned and walked the other way, avoiding me just like everyone else did. Lunch was slightly more difficult. I was tense weaving through the crowd, trying to stay a careful distance away from everyone around me as I made my way to Elise's table, wrapping my arms around my torso protectively. Everyone just seemed so much closer than usual. It was going to take some getting used to. I resumed my normal lunch routine, sparing the occasional glance at Edward and Jasper's table, where they were eating in silence. But I couldn't drown out the conversation at my own table, like I was able to when I was tired. Alice was trying to cunningly con Rose into a sleepover at the Hale house. Rose had no clue about Elise's fixation on her wayward brother. "Come on, Rose." Alice shouted at her from across the table. "It'll be fun. I'll let you borrow my red Manolos," Alice coaxed, bribing Rosalie with designer footwear. But Rose was staring at her nails leisurely, while Emmett fingered a lock of her long blonde hair. "I don't see what the big deal is, Alice. My house is boring," Rose huffed. Emmett leaned towards Alice then. "Yeah, plus Rose already has plans with the sexiest man in Forks this weekend. Isn't that right, Rosie?" He wiggled his eyebrows suggestively. I snorted. "That's a little pretentious, don't you think?" I chuckled, smiling at their exchange. Suddenly, they all froze and turned towards me with shocked expressions. I let my chuckle die away quietly. "What?" Elise's mouth was slightly parted, and her brown eyes were so big I thought they might pop out of their sockets. Rose and Emmett had similar expressions. My smile fell. "I'm sorry, I was just joking, honestly," I stammered, blushing, and dropping my head back down to the book that had lost my attention. The table was quiet for a few moments, and then Emmett erupted in a loud, booming guffaw that made me jump.
"Well, what you know? She really does talk."
He laughed louder before Rosalie smacked him in the back of his head. I knit my eyebrows together. Had I never once spoken in front of Emmett?
"Sorry,"
he mumbled while rubbing the back of his curly head. I attempted a small smile for him, but it was rather disturbing. Aside from Edward, Emmett was the closest guy in my life, and I had never even spoken in front of him before. The truth was, Emmett was a large man. He was no guy, and he certainly wasn't a boy. He was loud and big, and he made me nervous. But I just spoke to him for the first time. Secretly, a part of me was hoping whatever breakthrough I had with Edward would somehow carry over to other people. Maybe he wasn't so special after all. Perhaps I was getting better. Emmett was a nice guy. He wouldn't hurt me. I closed my book with a loud thud, and slammed it on the table. Alice, Emmett, and Rosalie were still looking at me warily. I forced a smile at Emmett, trying to not overthink what I was about to do, and raised my chin determinedly, rounding my shoulders back. "I can do this. Please forgive me, Emmett," I said